Warning.
Warning!
Now for a word of caution.
Broadcasting straight from the All Hazards Prepper Command Center. Welcome to the All Hazards Prepper Show, where we discuss everything from natural disasters to human-made fiascos, technological failures, and those SHTF scenarios, with a hint of discussion on emergency management. Our mission: to keep you aware, prepared, and alive. We've got top-notch experts giving you the information you need to be ready for any hazard you may face. So you're not just prepper smart, but also survival ready. Now, buckle up for another thrilling episode and welcome the All Hazards Prepper himself, Blake.
Welcome back to the All Hazards Prepper Show. This is your host, Blake. I hope everyone is staying aware, staying prepared, and staying alive out there. Today, we have a very exciting guest on. We have Andre Bowers, he is our first international guest, and he will go into that. He is from Europe. He is with the CBRN Academy. CBRN stands for Chemical, Biological, Radioactive, and Nuclear. We will talk about in Season 3, we have talked about hazards that exist from active threats, from terrorism, from intelligence, really talking about foreign actors and internal actors that can cause issues and cause disasters to occur, and what as preppers we need to do with that. So this is a perfect time to talk about CBRN and talk about gas mask and stuff like that. That is what Andrew does and talks about on his content. So Andrew, start us off. Tell our viewers where you're from and a little bit about yourself and how the CBRN Academy got started.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Andrej. I'm from Slovakia. I'm a civil defense instructor and I specialize in teaching civilians, or recently also law enforcement units, how to properly use protective equipment, mainly CBRN. Actually, I pronounce it CBRN. Is that incorrect?
No, I think that's right. In the U.S. and the military, they call it CBRN. So either one's right, I think.
Yeah. So mostly how to use gas masks, protective suits, how decontamination procedures should be handled, and stuff like that. It's basically my hobby, let's say. Even though I'm state licensed civil defense instructor, it's not my line of work. What I do for a living is that I work with actually very dangerous chemicals in the line of pest control. Mostly I deal with insects in wood that's being shipped to countries like China, for example, from Slovakia. And so I have a quite extensive practice when it comes to usage of protective equipment, or whether how to use it myself or whether how to teach other people how to do it. Some time ago, we decided to spread this knowledge through YouTube. It started basically on Instagram, but it doesn't have much audience because this topic is not really that interesting for most people. So we started to make videos, and the channel is doing quite fine, I guess. It has its audience, and most importantly, companies started to reach out to us. So for example, now we have a collaboration with a Swedish manufacturer, SES Protection. They sent us their gas mask. We're about to review actually this month. And there are other companies who make decon tools and lately also suits. So yeah, things are looking pretty well.
Excellent. That is a great introduction. And yes, like you said, CBRN or CBRN, what we call here in the U.S., can be a little dry. Unfortunately, it's not. I mean, some people, if you're like us, you might find it exciting. But if you're the average citizen, if you hear the word CBRN, you're probably going to ask first what that means. And then once you talk about it, they're probably going to go and freak out and think it's something bad or something like that, or think it's terrorism. But CBRN can really be, of course, it's usually applied in a threat, especially here in the U.S. I don't know about over in Europe, but whenever I talk about CBRN, people think it's a threat type of thing, think it's part of terrorism, think it's part of it's an intentional act. But really, CBRN could be just that run of the day hazmat spill. It could be pesticides. It could be anything that can harm us. That is a chemical. It's a biologic, or it's radioactive. Or of course, radioactive and nuclear are both similar thing, same thing. It's just applied to different contexts. So, great introduction there. We are going to talk with Andre today about gas masks, of course, and getting into that. So, first, Andre, just tell us, our listeners, a little bit about what CBRN is and a little bit a background about it.
You said it well that the difference basically between CBRN, and hazmat is that when it comes to CBRN, it's always intentional. Yeah, it involves terrorism, military, or intentional use of chemicals, nuclear devices. Whether when it comes to hazmat, it's something that happened accidentally, for example, some chemical spill or a nuclear catastrophe, or like Chernobyl or something similar. In Slovakia, or in former Czechoslovakia, there was a great, very big network when it came to civil defense, which now is in ruins because the past 30 years it was totally neglected. And whenever I talk about with regular people about this subject, and the ones who are older than me, they're always like, oh, not this thing again, because back then it was mandatory at schools to know how to use gas masks, how to make makeshift protective equipment and stuff. So they're not really up to, and it's more about the European mentality. People in here don't share the same military mindset as Americans do, and that's why most big portion of our viewers are actually Americans, preppers who would like to be prepared for whatever situation that might happen.
Absolutely, that's a great talking point there, Andre. And yeah, I feel definitely most Americans, not most, but there's a good percentage of Americans that are preppers, or a little bit more like Europe was, 30 years ago. But there's certainly that population out there that are not prepared, and they don't want to be prepared. They don't want to talk about these subjects. They don't want to talk and discuss and plan and strategize on how to respond to not only CBRN but other natural disasters that are very frequent here in the U.S. So I definitely I understand where you're coming from, and that's definitely a great way to start, especially while you're starting this academy. So kind of going into what are some CBRN's events that have happened in the past? Are they always intentional? Have we seen accidental CBRN types of events before? But really, we kind of already discussed, CBRN and hazmat are it's really just a formality of what if it's intentional or not. And maybe just talk about some incidents, maybe especially over in Europe, that we don't really talk about here in the U.S. a whole lot.
Well, the best example I can think of is First World War, where chemical agents were basically used on the battlefield for the first time. The first chemical which was used as a chemical weapon was chlorine, or chlorine, I guess. And then it evolved into even more sinister chemicals. For example, mustard, or for example, how is it, phosgene. So this was because apart from the Great War, or World War I, I can't really think of any intentional use in Europe. But for example, in Tokyo in the 1990s, there was an attack on a subway with sarin, and sarin is a nerve agent. Nerve agents are the most aggressive, toxic, and deadly warfare chemical agents known to man. For example, during the Vietnam War, Americans used a very toxic pesticide called Agent Orange, which to this day is causing a lot of health problems for the people living in there. It's a generational thing because it affects your genes in a very negative way. And we all know of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So
Yes.
basically, so yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely some great incidents there. And when I think about CBRN incidents, those are what I come to mind. We don't use chemical warfare a whole lot anymore. Every warfare has definitely changed over the last 30, 20 years in sense of how the tactics of military really is used. But certainly that aspect is still there if we were to come to a war or get into a war where it was a little bit more like World War I, World War II, where it's a little bit more globalized instead of very centralized into where it is. We definitely could see, these events happening. Really, when I think about CBRN, I'm thinking about what we here in the U.S. focuses now on, which is biological attacks, maybe a dirty bomb or a dirty nuclear bomb, which essentially has radioactive in that bomb that is going to a radioactive part of protocol. parts
Particles.
that, yeah, particles, that's the word, and that will span out and cause, mass destruction, mass hysteria, and really cause an incident here. We think about those types of sea burn events, which are terrible to think about, but I think in Europe, you guys call civil defense, and in the U.S. we call it emergency management, and that's what I do. Is I do emergency management, which is very similar. It's what civil defense used to be, but added on a whole lot more, and definitely evolved, especially post 9/11. But really, that is very similar in what you guys do. And maybe could you just really quick talk about what civil defense is there? You said you were a certified civil defense instructor. What does that entail for those that maybe do not know about that overseas?
Sure. I'm state licensed to run educational activities when it comes to civil defense. And okay, civil defense, it's a broad term, and I specialize in protective equipment and how to use it, and it gives me the right to make emergency plans for municipalities, organizations, but that's more of like a bureaucratic thing, and I prefer some action because you can study the crisis management at universities in here as well, but those are very uninteresting things for me. I prefer to be in the field. I prefer to work with people because it's not just about how to put on a gas mask and you're done. You have to be physically ready for that. You have to be quite in a good shape. And when it comes to our life trainings, we try to create these various scenarios where people are under a lot of stress. And that's when they realize what mistakes they would make in a situation they wouldn't want to make them.
Absolutely. Yes, very similar to emergency management in that sense. Definitely a little different in sense of how you guys, I guess, how you guys operate. But yes, emergency management is definitely very. If you work within the government portions of emergency management, within local or state or federal, it's definitely very bureaucratic. Is definitely a good word for it. So, kind of moving on and talking about CBRN incidents. What are some before we get into gas mask and personal protective equipment? What are some ways families at home as an individual can prepare for these CBRN type of incidents, whether it's a intentional CBRN incident or if it's a an accidental hazmat spill or something. The response to them are very similar or nearly about the same. So, what are some ways I guess people can prepare for them?
First, you have to know your enemy. You need to know what, for example, certain chemicals cause. For example, there are two types of chemicals very prevalent in Slovakia, and it's chlorine and it's ammonia. And both of these are very aggressive, but they behave differently. For example, in World War One, the soldiers in the trenches made a huge mistake by trying to hide from the chlorine gas in the trenches because it sticks to the ground, whereas ammonia tends to rise up. So when there is an ammonia spill, you don't want to go into buildings, for example, upstairs. That's even more important when it comes to radioactive particles or radioactive materials. There are various sources and there are various types of radiation. So another important part of what we do is that we try to educate people about either chemicals, their properties, how they behave, what they do, and the same applies to radioactive and nuclear materials. Most people, we are trying. What we do is we release infographics, which are easy to understand because most of these topics are pretty complex. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a nuclear physicist, so I try to make these topics more approachable to people. But on the other hand, the biggest audience we have is on LinkedIn, and that's where we release these infographics every month because there is a lot of specialists, there is a lot of basically grown people. They find it quite interesting, and that's the first line of defense: know your enemy. Second, how to get prepared. A few months ago, we released a video tutorial on how to make makeshift protective equipment from regular household items you can find basically in every household. And that's something that's not being talked about a lot because in America, the business with protective equipment is booming. It's a great deal of money. Companies are investing a lot of into marketing of their products, whether they manufacture them or just resell them. But there is this trend of using influencers, YouTubers, and of course, talking about improvised protective equipment is not what's good for their business. I'm not saying that improvised protective equipment made from blankets or whatever are somehow better than regular protective equipment, but it's at least something. And most importantly, who actually carries this kind of stuff around? I have, like, I don't know, 30 gas masks, various suits, and whatever would happen outside of my household, I'm completely unprepared. So that's also a thing to consider, where the thing happens.
Perfect. Definitely a lot there to break down. You were talking about the rise in personal protective equipment, gas masks, hazardous material suits, and we could, as preppers, we might think, well, is that because of, is there threats of CBRN events happening more often? Absolutely. We haven't seen this type of incident, knock on wood, type of happen, here in the U.S. Certainly overseas is talked about, happened a couple times in smaller scales, but really, I think the rise in personal protective equipment is because we are becoming more I don't want to phrase it, a safe environment. Our workers are no longer wanting to be directly exposed to these chemicals. We have, safety and OSHA, which is our federal agency around workplace safety for private and public sector. And I think really that personal protective equipment is probably coming from those types of laws and regulations that we have to have in place to protect workers and citizens from these hazards that they're exposed to. But it was interesting to hear about what chemicals are common in Slovakia. In the U.S., very similar chemicals are common. Here we do see a little bit more sulfuric acid, sodium hydroxide, nitrogen, and things of that nature as well, especially when we're talking in areas around rural communities. There's definitely more chemicals that are known or not known about because of fertilizers and things that are used in agriculture communities, which can easily become stolen and used for these types of CBRN incidents as well. So definitely great to break down what you guys do over there to protect yourself and all of that. So kind of moving into these personal protective equipment discussion, really what is personal protective equipment that is needed to handle these types of CBRN incidents, and can anyone purchase them? Is it you have to be a governmental agency, or you have to have a reason to purchase it, or can just anyone go and purchase them?
Well, since we are talking now about the American public and the industry with protective equipment is booming there, you can buy various types of protective equipment in the US. And it's important to distinguish, for example, the quality of it, because there are a few companies, I won't be naming them, which are reselling Chinese gas masks. They buy in bulk online and they resell it in the US under the name of tactical gas mask. That's the word, tactical. That's what attracts a lot of attention because it sounds serious. It screams of quality and importance. But these Chinese gas masks are in most cases made of silicon rubber, which would be good enough with the right filter, because most people, they are asking me what is the best type of gas mask, but they never ask about the filter. And in my opinion, filters are even more important than gas masks themselves, because even the cheapest gas mask, which seals on your face and you know how to use it properly, is better with the filter that provides, let's say, universal protection. It has a great properties. So people often tend to forget about that. We made a great tutorial about types of filters. It's not an easy topic. It's very complicated. So if someone is interested, you can look it up on our YouTube channel, CBRN Academy. And another problem, back to the silicon face pieces, the problem with them is that the silicon is good enough for example, I don't know, situations which involve riot control agents or not as aggressive chemicals. For example, this gas mask has been decommissioned a long time ago. It was a US Army respirator M40, and this M40 was made of a silicon face piece, And the problem with this build is that very aggressive warfare chemical agents like mustard will basically eat through it. And in time, I'm not sure how long would it take, but eventually it's going to happen. So if you're looking for a gas mask, a new or a surplus, you want to buy one made of butyl rubber. It's the black rubber gas masks. And what we deal with also on our channel is whether surplus gas masks are good enough, because companies, especially the ones who resell stuff from other companies, they import it, they buy cheaply and they resell it. They try to scare people by telling them, no, you can't buy a surplus mask. And it's a very tricky topic, because on one hand, when you buy a gas mask from a surplus store, no one guarantees you anything. Whenever you buy a surplus mask, there is always a disclaimer that this is only for collecting purposes and it's not meant to be used as protective equipment. Of course, these companies want to protect themselves. But we tested a lot of gas masks, even from 60s, 70s. And if they're stored properly, if the mask isn't damaged, if the valves, inlet and exhaling valves are still in great shape, and if the mask is used with a new reliable filter, these masks simply work. They provide all the necessary protective factors you can get from a gas mask you buy for, I don't know, $500, because there is not a there is not a limit when it comes to prices of some very advanced, technically advanced respirators, which are also available to civilians in the US. And prices, of course. Most people who watch our channel, they have families. They have children, wives, they have children. So, of course, when they're considering buying protective equipment, it's not just for themselves. It's also for other family members. And when you think about the gas mask that costs $500 and you have to buy them, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, you're gonna think twice about the price. It might be the latest model, it might be the most comfortable, but in the end, the price tag will be making the decision.
Yes, that is definitely great. Yeah, gas, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But these types of personal protective equipment as a prepper, whenever you're kind of going through your threats and going and talking about and building out your what you want to prepare for and the resources that you gather, these types of things unfortunately might fall to the bottom of the list because they can be costly, but you kind of got to look at what they're used for, and you definitely don't want anything cheap here. You want to look at things that are cost effective, but also will protect yourself and your family if one of these events, a CBRN type incident, did occur. So that's great information there. Talking, about the gas mask as what you guys special in at the CBRN Academy, and talking about how do if someone who's never put on a gas mask before, never put on a respirator, how do you use it and why, what are the different, parts of it, with the easiest, if you could explain on a podcast here rather than a YouTube video, but what's the, how do you use one and operate it?
You might have the most reliable gas mask on the market, but if you don't know how to use it, it can't protect you. First thing is that the first big problem is facial hair, especially when it comes to men, because all gas masks work in a fashion that they create a sealing line around your face. If the mask doesn't seal, it can't protect you. So it's important to remember that you have to be shaven. It's ideal to be clean shaven, but who is? The real problem is these enormous beards men tend. Of course, you can't be thinking about these situations on a regular basis that, okay, am I going to shave because something might happen today? You have to test it for yourself. I have a facial hair and it doesn't obstruct the seal of any gas mask I work with, because it's not as robust. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. Facial hair definitely. I was a firefighter. If you're a firefighter or you come from that type of field, you know that you can't have facial hair. That's why a lot of us have mustaches, because it doesn't go below our chin, and that way you can put your mask on without obstruction. Definitely, these are things that you have to train with and train on. And talking about that. as well. If you can talk about, just how expensive is a gas mask? What's the cheapest, best option out there, and what are your recommendations? And how often do you have to, maintain it? How often do you have to replace the filters? And really, what else does it once someone gets it, puts it on, test it, puts it in the closet? What is that lifespan to that product, or that gas mask? And what does that span look like?
When it comes to prices, situation is quite different in Europe and America. But there is a reselling company in the US that sells protective equipment from Czech Republic for double the price. You can buy it in here. For example, we actually today we released one of the review, and we bought it. We bought that specific high quality, good enough gas mask for 120 euros, which is basically the same in dollars. But in the US, it goes for 230 or so. From this perspective, things are pretty expensive in America because there is a big market, and people are willing to pay the money for it. I understand that, but call me a spoiled European. I have a certain limit. My personal limit is $300. That's the mask. That's the maximum I would pay for a brand new respirator. Of course, it's different with other pieces of equipment, especially suits. They can be really, really expensive. Not to mention detection devices, and these are not really available for civilians anyway. I mean, high quality ones and not just some knockoffs. Let me think. So, the lifespan. The lifespan of a gas mask, in my opinion, the lifespan of a gas mask, of basically any gas mask, is unlimited if it's stored properly. You mentioned maintenance. Basically, gas masks don't need any kind of maintenance. If you use them like we do, that we train a lot in them, then of course it's good to wash them from time to time. We also made a video about that. What things you can use. Water is more than enough, and some liquid detergent. But the most important thing when it comes to maintenance of gas masks is how you store them. Because I see a lot of people who display them in their rooms, in the places they live. And if there is one thing that impacts negatively the rubber parts, it's the sun, it's the light. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Always store your respirators in dry and dark places. I always store them in boxes they came in. That's a very simple rule. When it comes to filters, that's a trickier thing, because you can't really say, there is no clear indicator when the activated carbon inside the filter is done or it's still good enough. The only way how to tell whether the filter still works is to try it on, use something with strong odor, and when you can feel these odors through the gas mask with that filter, then the activated carbon is done. And the best way I can recommend to handle filters is to never open the ones you buy, because they always come sealed in vacuum. If you want to use them for a training, get yourself a pair of used filters, expired ones. They're very cheap, I'm talking military surplus. You can easily breathe through them. The activated carbon is saturated, so they won't protect you and you can't rely on them. But if you don't have to, never open the filter packaging. I have many filters still sealed, and I will never open them unless something really serious happened and they really need to be used in a real life scenario.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah, that's definitely great advice there on gas mask, and especially whenever how to store it. And it's just like a lot of things that we as preppers have is, we want to make sure we store it in environments that are climate control, no light, things of that nature, and not hot and not cold. That's a good temperature. So that's the same that applies with these gas masks. So kind of, wrapping us up here, what are well, we've already talked about, how to store them, but how often should you train with them, and kind of go into, why we should train on putting them on and just not putting them in the closet and going on with it.
So, just because a gas mask is made of high quality materials, it's certified, it doesn't mean that, for example, for your facial structure, it's gonna be first comfortable. That's why you need to test gas masks. Okay, ideally before you buy them, but if you're shopping online, you can't do that because once that mask comes to you, you unpacking it, you try it on, you just can't return it like that because it has been open. So it's good to know what you're having. That's the point of it. Because if you're about to spend hours in any gas mask, you'd better be sure that it's comfortable enough. Second, you'd like to know how breathing goes for you. The same applies for the filter you have with the gas mask, and most importantly, whether you're fit for it. If a situation requires you to, for example, run, that might be a problem for some people because breathing or navigating through terrain in a gas mask, which, for example, has a limited field of view to eyepieces instead of a visor, that might be tricky. For example, operating anything, hand movement is quite different. So you have to grow accustomed to the feeling of having the gas mask on.
Yes, that's definitely a good point there. Is when you're training with these things, it's just like anything. If you have a bug out bag and you want to make sure that you're able to carry it for however long you want to set, a couple miles or however long you feel you might have to. Same thing applies with these gas masks is doing that. So Andre, definitely a great conversation. Great to learn about what you do and your CBRN Academy. Kind of wrapping us up here. Something I like to ask every guest that comes on the All Hazards Prepper Show is, especially from someone in Eastern Europe, what is that disaster, whether it's man-made or natural, that really keeps you up at night?
I think the answer is simple: nuclear war.
Yes, I think that is definitely keeps a lot of people up at night, especially in the U.S. in current times. Something that we talked about today is definitely applies to that. So everyone, make sure we go and you're on Instagram and YouTube. Are you anywhere else that anyone else can go follow you on?
Yes, our main platform is YouTube. We're on TikTok for some reason because a lot of people like the short videos we make because they're quite over the top. And we are on LinkedIn because that's where we communicate with other specialists, companies, and various professionals from various fields.
Excellent. Yes, everyone, make sure you go follow the CBRN or CBRN Academy on those platforms. They have post some great videos. If you're interested in getting a gas mask, reach out to them. I'm sure they would be happy to tell you which ones are the best, and definitely is on their YouTube videos. I hope everyone enjoyed this show. This is something that we need to talk about. Remember that this season 3 is something that we're talking about with active threats and terrorism and events, human-caused events that go on in the world that we want to prepare for and make sure that we have resources like gas masks to prepare for. I hope everyone stays safe out there and enjoyed the show. Remember to stay prepared, or stay aware, stay prepared, and stay alive. The All Hazards Prepper out.
The All Hazards Prepper is a part of the All Hazards Emergency Management Group, where we prioritize emergency preparedness at the household and family level. That's why we created the Household Emergency Operations Plan, or HEOP. This comprehensive all-hazard emergency plan is specifically designed to prepare your home for various disasters and emergencies. The HEOP is designed for families, couples, and individuals, ensuring that every member of your household, including pets, is taken into account. It goes beyond standard family emergency plans, providing you with a robust strategy to be well prepared when a disaster strikes. The HEOP is available for just $3.99. Yes, you heard that right. $3.99. A small investment to help ensure your family is ready for when an emergency or disaster occurs. Don't have time to fill out the HEOP or need a plan that's specifically tailored to your family's needs? Reach out to us. We'll collaborate with you to create a solution that fits your requirements. Visit our website at payhip.com/allhazardsem group. From there, get your HEOP and explore our other emergency preparedness solutions today. For tuning in to the All Hazards Prepper Show. The All Hazards Prepper platform is part of the All Hazards Emergency Management Group, LLC, committed to assisting individuals, families, small businesses, and event or entertainment venues in prepping for various hazards. Be sure to follow the All Hazards Prepper on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. Always remember to stay aware, stay prepared, and stay alive.